As we have been discussing, the Department of Government Efficiency, being led by Elon Musk, continues to dig through agencies of the federal government for waste, fraud, and abuse. Of course, you don't have to look too far. And now he's turning to the Department of Education. Yesterday, DOGE terminated contracts totaling nearly $1 billion, that's with a B. That includes $101 million worth in DEI training grants. Given how students in America have been underperforming over the past few years, is it crazy to suggest that maybe they should focus on ABCs rather than DEI? I mean, to me, that makes sense. Well, here with me in studio to discuss this and much more, Nicole Neily, president and founder of Parents Defending Education. Nikki, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so first, give us your grade of the second Trump administration's actions as it pertains to education so far.
I think so far, I'm going to give them an A. And this is not grading on a curve. This is not doing equitable grading. This is just, promises made, promises kept. And so I think we're really excited to see what the next 4 years are going to be like, because now it's time to put some meat on the bones.
Now, there's been some rumblings that the Department of Education may be completely eliminated via an executive order by the White House, which has the left all worked up. In fact, Friday, I think it was, they had Democratic congressmen down trying to get into the Department of Education to basically hold a protest.
Well, I think it's sweet because, this is finally, they actually care about education. I was in the House Education Committee on Wednesday testifying, and a lot of those members were actually not there. So the fact that this is now on their radar shows that at least something's breaking through. Elon has their attention. But as you alluded to, there is so much garbage in that Department of Education budget. They have been focusing for the past 4 years, and frankly, much longer, on pretty much everything except for educating our children and keeping them safe.
Talk a little bit about your testimony before the House Education Committee. In fact, earlier in the program, we had Congressman Mark Harris on, who is a member of the Education Committee. What was the focus of your testimony?
Certainly, the NAEP scores that came out recently underscored the fact that America's schools are failing our children before our very eyes. And that's because they have focused all of their time, all of their money, and all of their spending on initiatives like DEI, like equity, like gender initiatives, keeping secrets from parents, keeping us at arm's length. And then, foreign funding coming in. There is a laundry list of problems. And so it's time to root out all of the bad and focus back on the good. And the core curriculum that students should be learning, and to partner with families to help children thrive. I mean, the fact that the Biden administration pushed us away, called us domestic terrorists, is such an insult to injury, because that school principal, that superintendent is not going to be there when my daughter turns 20 and is breaking up with a boyfriend or anything like that. They're trying to sever that parent-child relationship.
Nikki, you made reference to the response, the administration collaborating with leftist groups to try to marginalize and demean parents who showed up at school board meetings. It happened not far from here in Leesburg. Mm-hmm. And I would point to that and say that was a breaking point. It was a breaking point for parents. It was a turning point for the nation. And since then, we've seen a growing movement that I think manifested itself in this most recent election.
Absolutely. I think parents had a window into their child's education during COVID. They were disappointed by what they saw or what their children were not learning. And then when they tried to engage, they were pushed away. We regularly talk to parents who say, they're told, when they ask for curriculum, they're told file a public records request. They're quoted thousands of dollars. That's not how it used to be when we were growing up. And the fact that teachers now think that they know better how to raise our children than we do is just such a slap in the face.
I do think you're absolutely right. I think when parents saw the first wave was kind of what they were being taught because of COVID, they got a glimpse into it. But it's very similar, I think, to what DOGE is exposing. People knew there was a problem, that it wasn't right, but shocked to find that FEMA, the agency that is supposed to take care of disaster relief in this country, is spent $59 million last week housing illegal immigrants in luxury hotels in New York City, then it creates even greater of a stir. So I think when parents showed up school board meetings, they were treated as domestic terrorists. They were given the runaround. Look, I just think the momentum has continued to build, and now you have school boards that are refusing to comply with President Trump's executive order last week that said, look, this Title IX redefinition of sex to include gender, it ain't gonna cut it. That's not what the law said. It's male and female. But you have school districts saying, I don't care. We're not gonna comply.
Yes, I mean, we're seeing this, I think, frankly, across all policy issues, right? Be it immigration, be it all these other pulling out, defunding these other programs. I would remind all of these school board members about the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution. I mean, as you and I know, civics education in America hasn't been great, so I'm not totally surprised that some of these school board members don't really realize that they are accountable. But I think there are going to be real consequences for some of these actors. And again, as we start to legislate and implement President Trump's executive orders, there will be, we'll have to make some examples of some people.
Well, clearly, Congress is going to have to codify these executive orders because in 4 years, it could change back.
Right.
If the American people go to sleep. But let's talk about what we can do right now, because this is not just Congress. This is one of the things that I've been pushing very hard, is that as excited as we are about some of the actions taken by President Trump, they're executive orders. And this is not the finish line. This is just the starting line. Parents need to be, maybe some of these mama bears maybe need to come out of hibernation and show back up at these school board meetings and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not what the law says.
You are so right. I keep reminding people, do not hang that mission accomplished sign like George Bush did. This is very much a moment in time where the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We are watching all of these programs go underground, renaming themselves. The DEI department is now the belonging department, things like that. And so it's really incumbent on parents to keep an eye on their local district, on their state, and let people know. This is, see something, say something. We have a tip line. We encourage people to tell us, and then we'll get it to the right elected officials at the federal or state level.
All right, give out that tip line.
Sure. Our website is defendinged.org, and people can submit tips. They can say if they want to be anonymous, and then I'll be the bad guy. I'll get the hate mail, but we'll get the job done.
So let's talk about some of that job that you're doing, because I mentioned earlier about the over $100 million being spent for DEI training grants. Those have been terminated now, but Parents Defending Education had recently published a new report that exposed the full scope of the Biden Department of Education and these DEI grants. Tell us what you found.
Sure. We released right before Christmas, looking at $1 billion that the Biden administration had spent over the past 4 years in DEI-related grants related to hiring, programming, things like that. We then follow that up with a look into the Department of Justice, which does school safety grants. They spent $100 million on DEI programs as well, including in one in Ohio, knitting circles and yoga. That's not keeping our kids safe. And so I think about that saying, don't tell me what your priorities are, show me how you spend your money, and I'll show you what your priorities are. This is what the Biden administration, how they prioritize things. They viewed their stakeholders and their customers as these activists, as teachers' unions, and not as families, not as parents, and not as students.
Hey, this is so deeply woven into our government. I mean, the only way to get it out is basically what President Trump is doing, shock therapy.
Yep.
I mean, it is, if you can't just stick your toe in the water. You got to jump all in if you're going to get rid of this.
Yes, this is so entrenched. And the fact that we're watching Democrats right now dig in and defend the status quo has failed our children.
I think that's extremely important to go back and just look at, all right, how do we measure success? All right, what is the purpose of education? Obviously, we want to equip our kids to be productive, to be responsible, to be resourceful, to go into the workforce and be productive. Mm-hmm. But when you look at test scores and you look at the decline in the outcome of public education, we're not succeeding. But when you look at where this money is being placed and, all of this focus on sexual identity and DEI and all this, it's a distraction from education. So just look at the numbers.
Yeah.
If you can tell me that we're succeeding doing what we're doing, then fine.
I mean, the amount of money we're spending on a per pupil basis in this country has gone up year over year for the past 40 years. Achievement, as you have alluded to, has gone down. The number of middle-level managers and administrators is through the roof, and so the money that's being allocated is not even making it into classrooms. And so, it is. We're spending. They have our kids for 7 or 8 hours a day, and they choose to fill that time with identity politics and grievance.
Often teaching them and kind of guiding them counter to what their parents are teaching them.
Very much so. I think back to the midterms, the Michigan Democratic Party had a Facebook post they had to take down in shame, but it said the purpose of a public school is to teach children what society needs them to know. They presuppose that they know what our kids need to know, not you or I. You know, it's the...
Well, I alluded to Virginia politics earlier. You remember Terry McAuliffe running for governor in a debate. What did he say? That education belongs. We don't want we don't want parents deciding these things. We have to decide this. I mean, it was the arrogance that we see from those on the left. Now, Nikki, I'll be very candid as I talk about education on this program a lot. I think parents need to take. And I know you're not going to disagree with me on this, parents need to take the responsibility. God has given us both the responsibility and the authority to teach our children. Now, we can delegate the authority. You know, you can do that. I don't recommend it, but you can. But you cannot delegate the responsibility. God will hold you accountable for the education of your children. And so I highly recommend homeschooling. I know you homeschool your kids. I think it's such a short window of time that you have with your kids. So my wife homeschooled all 5 of our children. But I know not everybody feels like they can do it. I think more people can do it than think they can, because it's really not that difficult these days with all of the curriculum and the tools that are out there and the support groups and the co-ops. But we still have to address public education because the vast majority of kids are trained and educated, if you will, in public education. So we cannot neglect getting a hold of what's happening in the public school system.
Yes, and I think the more that parents exercise those options, be it homeschooling, be it saying, I'm going to send my child to a parochial school, your values don't align with mine, it puts pressure on the public school system to improve. They actually have to compete for families for that per pupil funding. And so a rising tide lifts all ships. And I mean, wealthy families in this country have always had school choice. I mean, they can choose to take time off, they can send their kid to a private school, they can move. It's the poor families that have been trapped by this. And again, where are the equity warriors that are screaming about the learning loss in our inner cities? Strangely silent.
Well, I mean, look at the response that you've had to school choice. The very ones who should be championing school choice to help those inner city kids and those who are in failing schools are more concerned about protecting the institution than they are the individual students.
I used to think that only the teachers' unions were the bad actor in this space, but I have since come to learn that the education industrial complex is so many other activist organizations, the professional associations, everyone is in it for a dollar. They don't care about our children at all. It really is the family that is standing between our children and the void, and it is such an important job.
You just follow the money. I mean, when you have this much government money involved in something, you are going to see the development, as you said, of the educational industrial complex. We see it with the military. Anytime there's government money around, there will be an industry that will develop around it.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily to further the purposes of that core entity.
No, they know how to write for the request for proposal and things like that, but they're not keeping our kids' best interests at heart. And many of us know our children have different learning styles. They need specialized instruction based on what their needs are, what their interests are. One size fits all is not the way forward.
Nikki, we're out of time, but give out your website one more time.
It is defendinged.org. So we have tips, advice, a map of different indoctrination problems around the country. So we encourage everybody to check it out.
Well, folks, be sure and check out that website. And Nikki, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the great work that you do.
Thank you for having me.
All right.